I don't know about you, but I like to go camping every now and then. I'm not a huge camping enthusiast, but I do like to get out into the woods and have a more rustic existence for a couple of days at least, and just enjoy nature. And I have a couple of things that I like to do. One of them is ride my bike out in the trails in the park. And I went camping once, and it was a place I'd been once or so before, and they have great trails. So I went out for my early morning bike ride, and I had a map of the park. It shows you roughly where the trails are. So I thought there was a trail that I could take that would get me back to where I needed to go. I had never been down it before. Now, if you have been out hiking or biking in state parks, you know that they use on these trails they've developed these things called blazes, which are different colored spots. They might be blue or orange, and they have different symbols, and they tell you where the trail is that you're on so you don't get lost. So typically, if you're in a state park with blazed trails, you're usually not going to get lost. But this particular morning, I started off on this trail I'd never been on before, and it wasn't an easy trail to ride on because there was a lot of thick matted grass, and so the bike wasn't going over it very well. So I was getting pretty tired, and I'd already been out for about an hour and a half or so, and it was starting to get pretty hot, and I was sweating, and it wasn't the greatest. But I thought, yeah, I'm not that far. You're in a state park. You got to be close to somewhere eventually. Well, it didn't work out that way this particular morning. I kept going and going, and well, here's the bad part. After a while, maybe 15 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen a blaze on a tree in quite some time, and I was wondering if I was actually on the trail anymore because it was kind of thick, the woods, and I don't know if I hadn't been paying attention because I was kind of hot and tired. I just hadn't noticed. And then you start doubting yourself. Did I make a wrong turn? Did I get off the trail somewhere? So after about, I don't know, a half hour or so, I wasn't sure where the heck I was, and a little bit of panic set in. But I calmed down for a second and took some deep breaths, and I tried to think of all those things they tell you to do when you think you're lost. Where's the sun? Look for the moss on the back of the trees. And unfortunately, I didn't have a compass. Typically, if you're in a state park and you have a map, you don't really take a compass with you. That's probably something I'll continue to keep with me in the future no matter what. But I started to, again, wonder where the heck I was. And you have to start to make an important decision. Should you try to go back and find your way back to where you started from, or should you forge ahead and try to get where you think you ought to be? So I sat down and I thought about that for a little bit. And of course, you're out in the middle of the woods by yourself, and one of the just nice things is that it's so quiet. If you just for a second listen, the only thing you'll hear is your own heart beating. It's that quiet. So anyway, I got composed, and I thought, I'm going to forge ahead. I'm in a state park. I got to be near something. I'll see someone, or who knows what. So I just kept going, and I didn't see any blazes. I just imagined that I was on the trail. It looked like I was on a trail, and maybe they wore off, or they didn't repaint them after a while. Who knows? Anyway, after about 15 minutes, I kept going, and things didn't look familiar at all. I hadn't been down this trail before, but eventually I thought I saw something that looked a little bit like civilization, and it turned out that what I saw was a telephone wire. Now, once I saw the telephone wire, I got a pretty good sense that I was heading toward this road that was on the map that was a utility road that actually you would drive your car back down to get into the park. And so after another 5 minutes, I got a little closer, and sure enough, I was able to finally make out that there were the telephone poles. I was never so happy in my life to see a telephone pole. Usually, telephone poles are pretty ugly, so I was glad to see that particular telephone pole, and eventually got me back to the road. And I was only a mile from our campsite, so it actually turned out that I was on the right trail. It was a trail that was intended to take me right across through the park to where I needed to get to. So my instincts were pretty good. I was going where I actually wanted to go all along. So I can't say there's a great lesson to be learned from this other than sometimes when you have to make a difficult decision where do I go back and start over, or do I forge ahead and try to accomplish what I set out to accomplish, sometimes you just have to go with your gut instinct and follow your internal decision-making process, and hopefully that'll get you what you want. Sometimes that might work against you as well. But when you're in these kinds of situations and you don't have anybody else necessarily who has the answers who can tell you what you ought to do, sometimes just go with your gut instinct.